I'm Hannah from Answer the Public. Thank you for joining. It's great to have you all here. A quick reminder of what our webinar series is all about. So we do these every month where we talk to professionals from all sorts of different backgrounds, from PR and creative to SEO and content, about how you can use search data to read people's minds and make better business decisions. So this isn't an Answer the Public tutorial. We do sometimes get asked that on our webinars. If you're looking for one of those, we do have one over on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/answerthepublic. We are recording this session. It's going to be sent to everybody. If anyone missed that at the start, you will get a recording, so don't worry about having to scribble down all your notes. And today's conversation is all about why PR needs public relations. And we're joined with Stella Bales, who some of you may know already. Stella is a director over at coveragebook.com. Stella, would you like to intro yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And yeah, as Hannah said, I am a director at CoverageBook, which is a reporting tool for public relations. But previous to working at CoverageBook, Hannah and I actually worked together, a digital marketing agency where we focused on communications. And then previous to that, I was more on the traditional side of public relations, if you like, and working at agencies in London as well. I've got years of experience in PR, but really passionate about insight and measurement in PR, which is what led me down sort of the tech route, but also talk about that topic quite a lot at different conferences and on my podcast, which is on the PR Resolution, which you can find on Spotify and iTunes. Cheeky plug.
Love the bit of promo. So today's webinar is going to be slightly different to our normal format. So usually I would be asking the questions. We have a couple of guests, but today I'm going to be joining in with the conversation. And the reason for that is that I also, as Stella referenced to, then worked in PR. So I actually trained as a journalist and then spent 14 years working in public relations before joining Answer the Public. And in particular, I worked with lots of kind of international brands, helping them to grow digitally through PR. So I thought this would be a great conversation for me to jump into. I've just shared our Twitter handles, so please do use those if you want to connect with us. That'd be great. I'm at Hannah M. Foster and at Answer the Public, and Stella is at Stella Bales and at CoverageBook. And we've also got the hashtag search listening, so please feel free to share away on that if you'd like to. We will be taking questions at the end of the session. If there is anything as we're going through that we spot in the chat, just drop it in there and we'll see if we can answer it as we go. If not, there will be some time at the end. So let's dive into the first topic. We're going to start off with, what is search listening? If you've been on any of our webinars before, we have touched on this, but we're going to specifically look at this here from a public relations view.
Okay, so I'm going to start with answering this in a slightly unusual way for a presentation. I want all of your attention now because I'm about to play a game. So I don't know if everyone is aware of a game called Have You Ever? So I ask some questions and then you respond. So have you ever Googled a sex position before? You can answer in your heads or write it down. You can share in the chat if you want to. Okay, so the next question is, what about a health concern? Have you ever Googled a symptom before? Okay, have a little think about that. And then my last question to you guys is, have you ever Googled a news story? So have you Googled to fact check it, especially more recently in the last couple of years?
We've got some yeses and some no's coming in the chat. I don't know what they're saying yes or no to, but
well, it'll be interesting. But my guess is that you guys have probably said yes to at least two of those. That's what we find and you're not alone, because we do go to Google for many different reasons. So whether it is a health concern or where we have a worry or a problem, many people are turning to Google. And the reason for that is because it is a private space and it offers anonymity, and people can go to that private space and ask questions that they might not ask their partner, their doctor, or want to go on social media and ask. So it's really a space where people are going to more and more to try and ask those questions. So going back to my first question of, have you ever Googled a sex position before? Now, the reason why I asked that is because back in 2019, there was a TV show called Love Island in the UK. I believe it's becoming more popular in other countries now, but it's extremely popular in the UK. There was a contestant on that TV show called Curtis Pritchard in that year. And through one of the games on the TV show, he mentioned the eagle. And the game was around sex positions. And he mentioned that. And so many people, when they were watching that TV show in the UK, went to Google the eagle. What is the eagle? Yeah, went to Google on their phones as they're watching the TV show. That question on Google absolutely surged. And it surged so much that the top results in the Google results, actually, and it was a website called Sex Info 101, and it crashed at the time of him, about a few minutes after him saying that on the TV show Love Island. You can see here, this graph was taken from data within Google Trends, which we're going to talk about a little bit more throughout the presentation. But it actually, yeah, as I say, so many people went and searched for more information on that, but the top website did crash and stopped working. So it just shows that we are triggered all of the time by things going on around us to go and search in Google. And maybe people did go onto social media as well, but they did start often with Google to go and ask those questions. And as I mentioned, that was taken from Google Trends, that data, and we are going to talk about how to use these tools a little bit more, but it is a free tool. So if you want to start to look into different search terms or things that are going on around us right now to see whether a news story that might be happening in your area or something that's big in the world right now, you can go and have a look at Google Trends to see what is trending, or you can put your topics in. It's an amazing resource of information. Yeah, it's not just TV shows that do trigger everybody to go to Google. There's triggers every single day, and so many that 3.5 billion searches are happening every single day on Google. Just really think about how many triggers that is for people around the world in every country going to Google to try and find out more information about something. And as I mentioned, it could be a TV show, it could be something that we've seen on social, it could be a conversation we've had with a friend. There are so many different triggers to make us search. And this is an interesting stat that we like to really sort of stop and think about, that 15% of those 3.5 billion searches every day are brand new and haven't been seen before. So if you think about what that really means, is it's something that's happened in the world or something that's made us search that hasn't happened before, or it hasn't made us search before. So that could be the news. It could be something that's going on. It could be a new worry. It could be a new pandemic. Hopefully not. But yeah, there's so many different reasons. And so if you really think about the insight to the human psyche and human feeling and public feeling, which is pretty important in PR, you can start to get a feel of like how important this kind of data is. An amazing book. And if you have been on previous webinars, you would have heard Hannah and Sophie mention it. So it's a book called Everybody Lies, and it's by an author, Seth Stevens-Davidovich. I always have trouble normally saying his name, but I managed it. So Seth, an ex-Google data scientist, and he wrote this book. And he's actually said, like, Google searches are the most important data set ever collected on the human psyche. And he's absolutely right. And it's starting there's a whole area of marketing around SEO and search who have already been using search data for years and years to put that into their marketing strategies. But it's so important for communications. As I mentioned, we need to know how the public is feeling and their opinions on topics before and after our communications. What an amazing way for us to be able to see that. So yeah, do recommend having a look at that book. It's available on Amazon and all of those good places. Definitely do read that. But we are going to show you how to get started with search listening. And if you really do think about those different topics, so far I've talked about a TV show being a trigger to make you search. But if you really think about all of the different things that you could be searching for in a day, and have a look at the top 10. So what you're looking at now is Google Suggest. So if you go to Google browser and then anything you start to type, That box that appears is the Google auto suggest data, and that is based on the most popular searches around the topic that you are putting into Google. So Google's trying to guess what you might want information on, and it's guessing by the most popular topic. So even just that small drop down is amazing insight on that day at this moment. What are people searching for around the topic that you are putting in? And then if you think about all of the different our target audiences for communication, so no matter what vertical you might be doing PR in, no matter what industry area, if it's B2B, if it's healthcare, consumer, etc., I could keep going, there's going to be insight within a Google data set. You just have to understand how people might search and then go from there, which we'll go into a bit more detail on shortly. But yeah, just starting here with Google auto suggest data is a really good start, and I guarantee you will see something straight away that's interesting that people are searching for around that, especially things that are going on right now. You can see here we've got COVID examples, and that is changing constantly. But Answer the Public, you are on an Answer the Public webinar that's been hosted by Answer the Public. So for anybody that doesn't know, Answer the Public basically takes that Google auto suggest data, so the drop down that we just showed you, but it absolutely takes every single question that's being asked around your topic, and then displays it in a really great display, which you can go and have a look at. Answer the Public, and you can just drop that into your insight and presentations, into your strategy documents for your clients. But also it really does display all of that information in a huge amount of detail. But all of this kind of research, so whether you're looking at Google Suggests, or you looking at in more detail on Answer Public, or whether you look at Google Trends, any kind of data on how people search is now being called search listening. And it's very similar. We're going to go through this in a bit more detail. It is really similar to social listening, or looking at human behavior or public behavior in other forms of research. But this is search listening, and it really is becoming a really important part of communications, insight and planning, as well as during your communications and also in your measurement as well. As I mentioned, it is very similar to social monitoring, but obviously it is a different place that we are observing that behavior. And this actually does show quite a good example here of the difference between social listening and search listening. Obviously with social, any kind of activity on social, people are in front of their peers, so there will be a pause, not for absolutely everybody, but for the majority of people who are on any kind of social platform. They are aware that they are either posting a picture or posting a statement that is in front of their peers, so there will be a consideration before that post is put out there. So for us, if we're using social monitoring as a research tool, any kind of information we gain from looking at that, we need to consider that people, it might not be their true thoughts and feelings, it's a considered thought and feeling because it's in front of their peers. If you compare it to search data, we've got here sunbathing. Someone sunbathing on their Instagram is going to be slightly different to when they're going to Google and talking about sunbathing. It's going to be about what factor they need for their baby, or how do you treat sunburn, or lots of other things which they probably wouldn't put on social media. So social, we're not saying this is a replacement piece of research for your target audience research, but it definitely fits in alongside it. And it's because we need to understand how human behavior is to really put that into, understand the public and then put it into our strategy.
Stella's got a really good phrase actually that sums that up. I know you've mentioned it on previous webinars and training sessions, but Stella says, if you live your best life on Instagram, you live your real life on Google. And I think that sort of really brings that point that she was making there to life.
Yeah, there's so many examples. I know that Sophie's covered a few on past webinars, but it's this sunbathing one there. There's another one which we've used in the past where there's a great picture of Instagram. I think it must be a classic picture that people use of the girl smelling a daisy, and then straight after she'll be Googling about her hay fever. So it just gives you a really good understanding of how people act when they're online. And if we as communications people need to understand that target audience at different moments, we need to understand them. We need to consider that, that's great to be able to put in all of that insight of social behavior, but we also need to know their true feelings as well to really connect with them and make our communications land. We're just going to talk now about how we would have done that research before. So we've just covered social monitoring, but as we know in PR, there are lots of other methods as well. We often look at surveys. So just to be clear, when we're looking at public behavior, public thoughts, often there is a couple of stages that we do this in PR. So we have our insight or planning stages. I know everyone labels it slightly differently, but then we get our strategy together, and then we have our activation of PR, which could be many different things, and then we measure how the impact of that communications. So we're actually going to talk about a couple of ways that you can use search data in that whole workflow. But I just want to start off with that first phase of really understanding our target audience. So traditionally, what we would be doing is maybe doing a focus group, maybe doing a survey, doing some social listening, which I've already mentioned. And they do all absolutely have their place, but there are some limitations, especially in today's world. And as you can imagine, I just showed you a screenshot of some searches around COVID. Imagine the difference in how people feel about some of the areas of the pandemic today in comparison to 6 months ago, even 6 weeks ago. Public opinion and feeling is changing constantly at such a rapid rate. And it's not just about the pandemic. It could be about all sorts of topics. We change our minds frequently throughout the day about where our standpoint on things, and that's fine. We all do that. It's because we're all constantly on different types of social networks and being influenced by different things. So if we accept that is the case, then as communications professionals, how we set our strategy needs to be able to keep up to date with that. Doing a focus group in January ready for your year's communications is not going to sustain a good strategy. It's just not. You're going to misunderstand your target audience, and it's just not going to land that well. So great to do that on some areas, but we need to be able to back it up with much more up-to-date research and data. So yeah, we've said that like doing a focus group or it might be out of date slightly. Also doing any kind of surveys, again, totally have their place. If you need to get a deeper understanding of a topic, focus groups and surveys are great at that. People can give you a much longer winded answer than you might get from social monitoring or search listening, but double it up because it might be out of date. Also, you find that some focus groups or surveys can be quite biased. If we're all absolutely honest, they are, because you are asking, they might not have had that opinion unless you were asking them that question. Subconsciously, people were led by the person or the organization they've been asked a question to. So we need to bear that kind of thing in mind, that it could be out of date, or it could be slightly biased, or it could be a small, that's what I'm looking for. It's a small pool of people that you might be asking as well. Remember, we just mentioned there's 3.5 billion questions going into Google every single day. The data set is absolutely huge. So it's really good to have a mixture of all of these tools in your armory when you're doing your target audience research. This might be a little bit harsh if we say fake news, but it is true. Some areas of research can be biased, and it definitely gets out of date very quickly in today's world. Slightly different if we was doing PR 15 years ago when we started, but not so much now. As I mentioned, when you're asking questions to people in a focus group setup or a survey, they can be subconsciously led. It has been proven that has happened. So with search listening, it's actually an observed form of research, similar to when you're doing social monitoring. So you aren't getting in the way of people. You are just observing how they behave to gain your data, which is amazing data to be able to put into your strategy. So yeah, I've probably gone through most of these points. I think there's definitely pros and cons to different types of research for your target audience research in your planning phases. Just be aware, obviously, these are going to be varied based on the type of public relations and the type of comms you're doing. So whether you are doing reputation, specialist PR, or if you're in a different type of vertical, if you're in B2B, observing how people behave on TikTok or Instagram might not be as important to you as you doing sort of more research, long questions and research-based surveys. Do just bear this in mind. It's not one size fits all, but search listening does really help in absolutely every area. So just back it up with that.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to how do you apply search listening to PR. there's an absolutely massive scale of how it can fit into different stages of your PR planning. On this webinar, we're not going to have the chance to go into detail into every single one of these, but I'm just going to pop something in the chat. We've just launched a brand new area of Answer the Public where we've pulled together some brand new videos that haven't actually been seen yet. You guys will be the first to see them, which give you a bite-sized overview in applying search listening, so public relations. And then we've also got previous webinars in there, which are an hour long, and they give you a really deep dive into the different topics, as well as blog articles too. So I would definitely check that out. We are going to touch on just one example for today's session, but we will be doing more and more on this. So please do come back to our future webinars where we'll hone in on those different areas. So to start with, right at the start of the journey, when you're in your planning phase, you can use search listening in the consumer insight phase, where you're looking to shape a comms or marketing strategy. Stella and I were talking about this just before the session, and we were going back to a client that we used to work on together, Marks and Spencer's, which is a big, I'd say it's a department store in the UK. And we were asked to help them to promote their new dresses. So that's quite a big category, but it was specifically towards their new dresses. Within that category, we were able to then use search listening to help us to refine the sort of questions around dresses that people wanted to know about the most. So we identified things like dresses with sleeves, so that was really important to some people, and dresses with pockets was to others, or dresses for wedding guests and things like that. And through doing that, from an absolutely huge category and lots of new products, we were then able to segment our PR strategy into specific areas and then do specific pieces of work, working with influencers and doing media campaigns specific to those using search listening. So that's at the start. The one that I am going to chat you through an example of today is consumer insight to shape a story. So then there's search data as the pitch hook. When I worked in the last PR agency, and I know from speaking to the guys, they're constantly doing this all the time now. So they're using that information from Google Trends or from the Google Suggest data to say, look, we know that this story is particularly interesting to people because it's trending in search, like people are searching for information about X topic, and you can actually put that in your pitch to a journalist to encourage them to cover this topic because it's important, because people are searching for it. Obviously, it's all about hits, particularly for the online media these days. They want people to be reading their content, and that's how a lot of news sites rank their content as well, is how many people are reading it. So yeah, if you can use search listening to help justify a reason for your pitch, then that's great. And we do cover that in one of our previous webinars. It's the one with Lou Parker from the guys at Propeller Now. I'll send it in the notes. Search data can also be used to monitor for reputation and crisis awareness. So we're doing a separate webinar completely on this, but I did talk about this in a couple of webinars ago. We used an example to do with Nike. I don't know if anyone remembers, but the US rapper Lil Nas X released a pair of so-called Satan shoes, which contained a drop of human blood. They weren't affiliated with Nike at all. It was like a rip-off, but Lil Nas X, it was great because he got loads of coverage off the back of it, but for Nike it was terrible because they weren't associated with this thing they didn't want to be, and actually people were searching for it in the wrong way. But you could actually monitor this campaign from both sides using search data and see what people were saying about it, and also track how long it was popular for. And then when the searches started tailing off and people were getting less interested in it, that was a good thing for Nike. And you can also use search data to help measure, in a similar way to the crisis and reputation stuff, you can help it to measure campaign success effectiveness. So we'll be doing another webinar which will focus on an example to do with KFC, where they had to change their tagline to do with COVID because it's finger licking good, but quite a few people pointed out when they launched a new ad that it wasn't very hygienic to lick your fingers during a pandemic. So they very quickly had to change their tagline and use that as an opportunity. So there was a PR campaign with different activations around that, and you're able to see people's change in search behavior around that campaign through search listening. So the example that we're going to focus on is using consumer insight from search listening to shape a story. So yeah, search listening can actually help you come up with your next campaign idea. And the example here is all to do with a gym brand in the UK called Pure Gym. The agency that Stella and I used to work with, they're called Propeller Net. They actually did this one recently for one of their clients. They did lots of search listening around people going to the gym, the information that people want about going to the gym, and they found out some fascinating truths that you may not have considered if you hadn't have looked into Google data. And one of the main things was that there's a lot of people that have anxieties about going to the gym, that are scared about going to the gym. So this snapshot here is showing the Google Suggest data. So as Stella mentioned earlier, you can just jump straight into Google Suggest and type in any topic, and the drop down that shows up underneath are new or newly trending searches around that particular topic. So it's all live, it's all updated constantly in Google. So it's that moment in time. They were able to find this insight, which they never would have touched on before. And I'm ahead of myself there. So yeah, Google Suggest is the wording that appears when you type a word or phrase into the Google search box. But also they then went into Answer the Public, and they found that people also were not only scared of going to the gym, but there was lots of people that were beginners and really needed the confidence boost and needed some help and advice to encourage them to make a start. So they found things like the gym for beginners, the gym for everybody, gym for dummies, but then also things like, will the gym help my anxiety? Will the gym help me lose weight? So people that are just really confused, they just don't know where to start. And then also things like the gym and mental health. And all of these insights were found in Answer the Public, just doing one search, which was for the gym. The idea manifested itself into a bit of a social experiment. So it included a piece of research where they sent people into the gym with heart rate monitors, and they also did things like showed them pictures of spiders, and they measured how their heart rate changed from going to the gym to these other kind of scary situations that they put them. And they found that the gym was actually the scariest scenario if you're a beginner to put yourself into. And so they created this campaign around that. So they did a lot of media pitching, and obviously it's lent itself to a really nice headline here. So they Brits are more scared of the gym than spiders and injections, and we can relate. So all of those scenarios were monitored, but they also created some really nice content on the website that talked about confidence and promoted resource around how to combat anxiety and to get yourself started. So it's a really nice example. And one of the points that the guys made on the last webinar, and I just think this is really interesting, is it goes back to what Stella was saying. Obviously you can use surveys in lots of different ways, but when I worked in PR before I switched over to the digital side, it was quite often people would revert to, we should do a survey because it's tried and tested, people knew what they were doing with that. But actually perhaps challenge your team and say, can we use Google data? Because if you're doing a survey, you're leading the questions in a certain way, you know what you're looking for. But with Google data, you can come up with something that you would never have even considered just by doing some simple searches around a particular topic using tools like Google Suggest, Answer the Public and Google Trends.
Just on that point as well, actually got picked up from Danny in the chat that you could use power words is what Danny said, but it's actually on that is that this search data that you get back from Answer the Public or any of the sort of search listening tools, it's real searches. This is the language or wording that people are actually putting into Google. And I think often in public relations, we come from the brand side more so than we do from the public side. And sometimes we can write copy or we can come up with key messages that are very brandy. So I think it's really, which is obviously very important, but it's really good to balance that with real language, how people were talking. And I think that example that you just went through, Hannah, with people being scared of the gym, people are actually searching for that. So that's the language that can be brought back into copy or to key messages. So it's really important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it works throughout the PR workflow. So there's not one point that you can use search listening for. It's completely across the board. So what tools do I need? We've touched on these and we do go into more detail in our other webinars as well, but definitely start with Google Suggest. It's really easy to use. I think it's probably the easiest tool out there. You just got to type in a word or a phrase. And an example that I've put here that I've snapped is the running shoes for. So if you're a brand like Nike and you're trying to figure out ways of promoting kind of running shoes or to come up with ideas around running shoes, just put in something like running shoes for, and you'll see all the different things that people are searching for around running shoes. So you've got running shoes for women, running shoes for men, flat feet, over-pronation, even for heavy men there. So that might be something that you would just never have thought of, but that is a top search that people are searching for, running shoes for heavy men. So there's people that out there that want that information, and that could spark an idea in its own. Then moving on to Answer the Public. So it is a way of getting to that Google Suggest insight very, very quickly. So when you use Google Suggest, you'll just get the top 10 suggestions around the keyword or topic that you've typed in, whereas AnswerThePublic scrapes that data en masse. So you'll get absolutely hundreds of suggestions around a particular topic or keyword. So you can just print all of the data out and just run through it with a highlighter, and it's a really good way to just save yourself an absolute ton of time. AnswerThePublic, there is a free version that you can use, that you can have a go of. You'll get a few different searches a day on that. So even with just a few searches, you'll get an absolute ton of ideas. But there is a pro version as well, which gives you more searches, and you can share it with your team, and you can set up something called search listening alerts, which is really great for crisis and reputation management, which we talk about on other webinars as well. And then Google Trends as well. So another free tool. Stella mentioned it at the start when she was talking about the eagle, which has kept me quite entertained while she was talking with some of the comments that have been going on in the chat. But it's another great tool. So Google Trends is anonymized, so no one's personally identified, and they categorize the search topics and it groups them together as well. There's many more tools as well that we can talk about in future webinars, but they're the ones that we really would recommend that you get started with to get your head into search listening.
Just on the tools, because somebody mentioned in the chat asking about how you get an idea of the popularity of searches in AnswerThePublic. Just in case anyone missed my answer in the chat, it's about you look at the green, I should be passing this over to Hannah, but it's the green gradient color in the diagrams, right, Hannah?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. So the darker the green color in the gradient, the more trending or kind of more popular that particular phrase is in AnswerThePublic, and it fades down. It doesn't mean to say that the lighter screen isn't popular. It's there because it's one of the top 10 around that topic in Google. So they're all popular. It's just the top to bottom. There are other tools that you can use to get keyword volume data. There's one called Keywords Everywhere, which you can use with AnswerThePublic, but this is getting a bit kind of techie to do with SEO, but they are based around kind of Google AdWords and people spending money on ads. So it's not that long tail, the editorial style searches that we're more interested in when we're coming up with ideas that will help with PR or help with our strategy. So, and finally, I mentioned this earlier, but we've just launched our new section in AnswerThePublic. So public relations -- listening. I'll put this in the notes. We've got 2 5-minute videos there, and we're going to be adding 3 more to that section as well. And this webinar will be added as well. So anytime we do any PR related content, it'll be added to that page. And our new videos that we've just launched, there's actually 2 on here, but the one that we've based the webinar on today is why public relations needs search listening. So they're less than 5 minutes long. I think this one's about 4.5 minutes long, and it gives a bite-sized version of the webinar we've been going through today. So if you want to share it with your teams, or if you've got any clients that would help to give a bite-sized overview of what PR in search listening is and how to do it, then I definitely recommend that video. So that's it for today. Has anyone got any questions? Has there been anything that wasn't clear or anything further that you'd like to know? We will not be answering any more questions about the eagle. I don't actually even know what it is myself, to be honest. I need to do my own Googling.
Yeah, we weren't part of the 4,000% increase. Okay, great question from Andrew. If you can slice and dice the AnswerThePublic data by country, what other ways it can be sliced?
Yeah, we can slice it by country. I'm not sure what you mean by in what other ways you can slice it. Yeah, you need to think about what it is that you want to get to. Google data is anonymized, so you're not going to find out personal information about the type of person that's searching, but that's across the board with Google data. They just don't release that information. It's the same as with Google Trends and Google Auto Suggestion. We've got a really good infographic that I can share with everybody, which really helps you to think about kind of the intentions of people that are searching, which will help you to group them into different tribes.
There was another good question from Rob about how credible we have found Google Trends data, especially as a source when we're using it for a PR story. I think that especially if you are actually going to be sharing this using Google data with a journalist, it's definitely a great place to get the insight to start off with and finding a story like the 4,000% increase, or suddenly seeing that huge spike in searches for the eagle when Love Island was on. that's a great, that was a big enough sort of news story for TV journalists to be able to go to that. And then you could, depending on the strength of the story or the angle, then go and back that up with more data. And I guess using that one as an example, Google Trends doesn't tell you how many people search for it. We were then able to go and use other tools such as Keywords Everywhere to then try and work out that data. It wasn't actually Keywords Everywhere. We used AdWords and a couple of other ones as well. But it's just, I would say, use Google Trends as the start of your hook or your story, and then look at other methods to back it up. But in terms of whether journalists actually use Google data in stories, yes, like it's definitely a very strong data source. Apart from the fact that we've already covered that there's 3.5 billion people using Google every day. That's a pretty strong data source. But we see, you probably all realize that you would have seen lots of stories that are just based on Google data. And it's because it's such a good data set. It's gone are the days of where a journalist would say it has to be of at least a pool of survey size of 2,000 people. Like now it can be a huge amount more.
Someone's just asked on that point, how would you know the spike was due to Love Island? What would be indicated in Google?
Okay, there's two ways to answer that. Yes, if you go to Google Suggests, you can see what's going on right now. So some people might have put, I can't remember back to 2019 exactly, but there probably would have been Curtis Pritchard, the Eagle Love Island. And you can start to see those differences in searches by looking at Google Suggests. Or looking at, if you're looking at Answer the Public will show you all of the different types of questions around a topic. So Answer the Public is great for that. But also, if there's such a bit, you can then look at if you're looking at Google Trends and you put in the Eagle or the Eagle Love Island, you can see the huge spike was at that time of day, on that day that he did say it on that TV show. So sorry about the sirens, very loud. But yeah, you can time it down to go, okay, it was the same time. So yes, we can't exactly say it's guaranteed, but I think looking at the time that increase happened and then looking at the different searches around it, then you can tell.
Cool. A few other questions. So someone's asked, should I use Answer the Public incognito? You don't need to do that with Answer the Public. It already will be incognito. But if you're using Google's auto-suggest, definitely open an incognito window, because otherwise it will map it to where you are locally. I know someone was asking about managing brands internationally, national and local marketing plans, and how to get a more localized view of the data down to city and neighborhood. So that's not something you can do in Answer the Public at the moment. We can search by country and language. I know that was another question actually, but yeah, you can refine by country and language in Answer the Public, but you can't get as specific as a city or neighborhood. With Google's auto suggest, obviously if you don't have it in incognito, then it will be tailored to where you are. So that's one way to do it.
I guess on Ruben's point though as well, if you're putting that, if that is a really important area to your research, it sounds like it is, then you may well be doing other types of on-the-ground research. So if you are talking to in-area influencers or like doing customer research, I know that when we used to work with retailers, we would do retailer research like in that store location. If you are doing any kind of other research in those localized areas, just remember that search data when you're in that area will appear localized. And just if you're there, or if you have people there, or you have localized marketing teams, get them to be doing their Google Suggests research, and maybe it could be part of your sort of planning and insight toolkits that you roll. It's really useful just to see the results that are coming up as well, not just by looking at search data, but looking to see what ads people are seeing or what kind of content's coming up, especially for PR. I would definitely still include that, but if you have people on the ground.
Cool. Thank you. So someone's asking, can Answer the Public indicate mobile search? Answer the Public uses Google Suggest data, so it's just it pulls in all searches on Google.
Thank you for confirming that in Google Trends you can refine down by state. Thank you, Janet and Mira, for confirming that.
Cool. Someone's asked, when someone searches for a certain product, do they still search on Google first, or do they go directly to Amazon, for example?
Yeah, it's different research set. It is a different search. You can get a good idea from using search listening, but you can do your own research, especially if you are setting up ads, or if you have your marketing team is setting up ads on Amazon, or doing like a strategy on Amazon pages that you're selling on. You can use the same methods, but it is a different data set, is to answer the question.
Cool. I think we've covered off all the questions. So thanks, guys. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. It's been great having you all here. We'd love to see you back for next month's webinar. We've got a couple in the pipeline. One is going to be with a panel, and it's going to be about share of search. We've also got one planned around using search listening for health. And also our next one of the PR set is around using search listening to measure campaign awareness as well. There's already a 5-minute video on that PR page that I shared, so it'd be worth checking that one out before it comes to the webinar. So thank you, Stella, for joining us today. I know that you're going to be a bit of a regular guest now on our webinars, so it's great to have you here. And if you've got any feedback, just let us know on Twitter, and you'll get an invite to the next webinars as well, as you signed on up to this one. If you do want to see anything, just head to our YouTube channel as well. All of our old webinar videos are on there. But yeah, thanks so much, guys, for joining today, and hope to see you all next month.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Stella.
Bye.